Hello there, and welcome back to Sleepy Tales by John. The Earth is getting warmer, it's slipping out of our controls, so tonight let's try something completely new. We'll take all the water on Earth and pour it onto the sun. I mean every single drop. Maybe that would cool things down a little. And once we've soaked the sun completely, this is only a what if, of course. And this is what would happen if we could gather all the water on Earth, all the vast oceans, all the winding rivers and quiet lakes, even the raindrops still clinging to rooftops, and gently pour it onto the sun. Would the sky soften a little? Would this blue planet find a cooler, calmer breath? Tonight, we're not in a hurry to find the answer. We're simply going to walk slowly together through a doorway in the imagination and let science lead us gently forward. Each thought will be a step, each image a soft breeze, and each discovery a deep breath that stretches the space inside your mind. This journey is not about arguing right or wrong. It's more like a quiet stroll under the moon, where you listen to the universe whisper while you listen to your own breathing. And at the end of that path, you might realize that this story about water and the sun isn't just about hot and cold in the sky, but about how fragile the little home is that you're lying on right now. So, if you're ready, let's begin. First, let's softly shift our gaze a little farther out. Because to understand whether water could ever soothe the fire of the sky, we first need to know what the sun really is. Not through cold numbers, but through feeling, through imagination, through the quiet listening of the heart. Imagine you're lying there, still in the warm, steady rhythm of your own breathing. But your mind begins to rise, slipping past the gentle layers of cloud, leaving the roof, then leaving the earth. As our planet shrinks behind you to a tiny blue pebble, you begin to drift toward the bright source at the center of the solar system, the sun. It is no longer just a distant streak of light you glance at from your bedroom window, but a great living presence that sleeps, breathes, and shines in its own strange way. The sun is not a fire. It is not burning logs. It is not anything we have ever truly seen on Earth. It is more like a vast soul, both gentle and fierce, floating in infinite space. If you could approach it, you would see that it grows far beyond anything the human mind was built to picture. A blazing heart that could hold about 1.3 million Earths inside it. An ocean of light where every drop carries enough power to destroy, and yet is also the warm source that feeds every new leaf on our planet. Inside that great soul is a world completely different from ours. A place where you cannot stand, cannot breathe, cannot exist. There, gravity is so strong that every atom is squeezed, forced to fuse with its neighbors. Every second, countless trillions of nuclear reactions happen, like invisible rain falling through the star's core. There are no cool, soothing showers here. This is a rain of fire, of energy, of ancient songs sung by protons merging, so they can create the light you see every morning. If you close your eyes and listen, you might almost sense something like a soft sigh from the sun. Waves of light spread outward like ripples after a stone falls into a lake. But here, the lake is space itself, and the stone is the fiery heart of the star. Light travels across the void, slowly but faithfully, taking more than 8 minutes to cross the darkness and touch your face, gliding over your skin like the faintest trace of a distant hand. You might think that fire must go out when it meets water, but that is an Earth rule, not a rule of the stars. Here, fire is fed by nuclei pressed together so tightly they have no choice but to fuse. In the heart of a star, there is no open flame burning. There are only nuclear equations singing, vibrating, and ringing out a melody that every planet in orbit is quietly obeying. That's why the idea of cooling the sun with water, as sweet and human as it sounds, is simply impossible. Not because the sun is too hot in some simple way, but because it does not burn the way our fires burn. A flame on your stove needs oxygen, fuel, and contact between molecules. The sun does not. It is a sea of plasma, the fourth state of matter, where everything has been stripped bare of its everyday form. In that world, water cannot exist as water. It doesn't even exist as steam. It would be torn apart so completely that the word water would no longer mean anything. Imagine you stretch out your hand and toss a drop of water into the flame of a candle. It sizzles softly, then disappears. But if you threw that same drop at the sun, it would never even get the chance to hiss. It would be ripped apart the instant it met the millions of degrees in the solar atmosphere. Broken down, then broken further, into smaller and smaller pieces. In the end, those pieces would simply become more fuel to feed the star's immense fire. That is why, to answer the question, can water calm the sun? We first have to understand what the sun is. Not to frighten you, but to help you feel the vastness of the universe and to see that sometimes the rules we know are only leaves in a much larger forest of laws. You see, when we step into the world of astronomy, everything becomes lighter. Even the grandest ideas can be told in a whisper. And now that the sun's soul has taken shape in your imagination, we can move on to the next part of the story, how a single drop of water could even hope to reach it. The path is longer than any child ever imagined. Standing in a playground, squinting up at the sun, and only shading their eyes from the glare. It is a path where simply beginning is already an adventure. Picture yourself there now, no longer on the ground, but seated in the soft chair of a spacecraft. There is no engine roar, only your heart beating gently, in time with your slow, even breaths. Outside the window, the earth is turning, carrying its seas, its forests, its roads, and all the places you've ever walked. And all of it is shrinking into a calm blue sphere, hanging in the dark. Far away, the sun still glows with its warm, honey-colored light. But this time, you will not just look at it. You will go to it. It sounds simple, just fly straight toward the light. But no, space does not work like the paved roads you know. Earth is rushing around the sun, at tens of kilometers per second, like standing on a fast-moving boat and wanting to jump into the water. You don't fall straight down, you fall along a curve. To travel to the sun, you must do the opposite of what your instincts say. Not speed up, but slow down. Not thrust forward, but cancel your sideways motion around the sun, like a swimmer turning against the current of an invisible river. That river is our orbit, and the ship you're in has to do something strange. Turn its back to the sun and fire its engines to slow down, like standing in the wind and opening your arms so the wind itself pushes you backwards. As the ship slows, the orbit can no longer hold you at a safe distance. You begin to fall inward, a plunge of 150 million kilometers, a fall that is never noisy, never rushed, only silent as the light grows larger and larger ahead. Let your imagination slide along that curve. Space outside is not a solid black sea as you once thought. There are thin layers of color, pale and misty, like silver fog woven into the light. As you move inward, the light does not just become brighter. It feels warmer, heavier, as if it's being spun from golden threads drifting slowly in the dark. The ship doesn't hurry. It floats like a leaf on still water, and you, sitting in that chair, feel time itself slowing down. Every part of the journey invites you into stillness. Your heartbeat easing, your breathing deepening, your eyes wanting to close at any moment, yet staying open just a bit longer because you don't want to miss what so few ever see. If you glance back at just the right moment, you'll see Earth shrinking behind you like a far-off memory. And in that shrinking world, you realize that even carrying a single drop of water away from Earth is as hard as carrying a piece of memory itself. Solar wind, radiation, and the cold gulf of space are always trying to turn water into vapor, then into ice, then scatter it into lonely molecules. But in this story, we go on. We keep our drops sealed in a small container like a treasure, one tiny drop carrying the dream of cooling a star. When the ship slowly adjusts its course, you feel the faintest push in your back. Not sharp, not harsh, just enough to slip you free from Earth's orbit and into deeper space. The most striking thing is not how quickly the sun grows, but how quiet the distance is. No wind, no sound, only light. Light like a golden whisper, calling you closer. And the ship, obedient to the laws of space, gradually falls a little faster, then slows again as its engines gently guide it. Everything is carried out like a slow dance, a dance you could follow with your eyes closed, simply by feeling its grace. The path to the sun is not a straight line. It's a soft arc, a gentle stroke drawn through space. If you could see it from outside, it would look like a drifting ribbon. And the ship, with its tiny drop of water, is gliding along that ribbon. Strange, isn't it? A journey this long, 150 million kilometers, and yet it feels like a meditation. Every stretch of the way invites you to listen to your body, to your breath, to the quiet stream of your own thoughts. We're not racing toward a destination, we're simply going, drifting closer to the light. And then, at some moment with no sharp beginning or end, the sun is no longer a point. It has become a wall of golden brightness, spreading out before you. You feel very small, but not afraid. It's like standing before the ocean for the first time in your life. You know you cannot stop the waves, but you still want to touch the water. That is what it feels like to approach the sun. Warm, vast, and beyond anything you can hold on to. Now the drop of water you've been carrying, that little story we began back on Earth, is preparing for its first encounter with that blazing light, a moment that will lead us into the next part of our journey. From the front of the cabin, a mechanical arm unfolds, slowly, like someone stretching an arm out of a dream. It holds a small cup of water, something so ordinary it's almost funny beside the roaring ocean of fire only hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. A cup of water, the kind you could pour yourself in the kitchen every morning, now being offered up for the first experiment of a cosmic daydream. The robotic arm tilts the cup with great care. There is no wind, no clinking sounds, only the sight of droplets drifting free from the rim, trembling in the weightless air. In the golden orange light, those tiny drops look like clear jewels, so beautiful you almost feel guilty letting them vanish. But they still drift onward, moving ahead into the region of space woven from the heat of a breathing star. And then, everything happens faster than a blink. Before a single drop can touch any layer of plasma, it vaporizes, not into smoke, not into steam. It simply ceases to exist as water, as if the universe swallowed it whole, leaving no trace, no mist, no echo. The only thing you might hear, if you imagine very carefully, is a faint little sigh, like the exhale of nothingness itself. As the droplets vanish, you realize your hands are gripping the armrests. Not from fear, but from the strange beauty of that moment, the beauty of absolute smallness, of utter insignificance, of the complete fragility of any attempt to oppose the oldest fire humanity has ever seen. If you could reach out, you might want to catch the last drop before it disappears. But in this world, water does not fall, does not linger, and has no time to wait. Right here, in the middle of that blazing light, a quiet lesson unfolds. There are things in the universe so vast that all our efforts are nothing more than a raindrop touching the sun. They leave no mark, they soothe nothing, they change nothing, except our own understanding. We cannot put out a star, we can only watch it, learn from it, and accept that in this universe, some things are born to forever lie beyond our reach. The little cup of water in this experiment is like a gentle reminder. No matter how big our ambitions, not every dream fits the scale of the cosmos. You look out through the ship's window where photons stream past like golden snow, And in that soft yellow, you feel a strange kinship, as if the sun is smiling kindly at humanity's innocent attempt. Not angry, not provoked, just accepting. Because to the sun, water is not an enemy. Water is only the brief breath of a small planet trying to understand what lies far, far beyond itself. If you tilt your head just a little more, you'll see those evaporated drops being broken down by the light until they no longer exist as water at all. They don't die. They become part of the light, part of the heat, part of the endless motion unfolding before your eyes. Maybe, from a certain point of view, that little drop never really disappeared. It simply changed shape so it could blend into the wider universe. And as the ship folds the robotic arm back in, a soft feeling washes through your body. Not disappointment, not sadness, but acceptance. An understanding that sometimes powerlessness itself is a doorway into the true nature of reality. Our effort may be small, but the lesson is vast as the light all around you. As you lean back into the seat, eyes half closed, you realize this first experiment was never meant to change the sun. It was meant to change how we see ourselves. To remind us that space is larger than our fears, larger than our ambition, and sometimes even larger than anything we can imagine. The ship is still drifting, light as a leaf on an ocean of radiance, and the dream of putting out the sun after this first test no longer makes you want to resist the laws of nature. It makes you want to understand more deeply, to keep exploring whether water, small as it is, might receive any other kind of response from that blazing star. So you open your eyes, gently, slowly, and prepare to step into the second experiment, where the dream will be scaled up and the lesson will reach further than that tiny glass of water ever could. Now, as the last echo of that little cup fades into the light, the ship glides onward, leaving behind a faint trail of imagination as delicate as mist. You're still sitting there, your gaze carrying a soft, lingering ache from the moment the water vanished before it could touch any part of the sun. But then, from within the stillness, another idea begins to rise. Not the idea of giving up, but of scaling up. If one small glass is far too tiny for the sun to notice, what would happen if we increased the experiment to an entirely new level? If instead of a cup, we dared to drain an entire lake? That thought slips into your mind like a stream, gentle but steady, and so your journey moves into a new chapter. A chapter that begins with the image of a blue mirror stretching all the way to the horizon. Lake Superior appears beneath the ship, so wide that if you didn't know it was water, you might mistake it for a misplaced piece of sky laid flat upon the earth. Still, vast and deep, like the planet's oldest memories. The wind skims across its surface, leaving ripples as fine as the Earth's own breath, reminding itself that it still lives, still turns, still remembers. The sight makes your breathing slow down without you even trying, as if no one wants to disturb a body of water that seems to be dreaming. Yet in the middle of that meditative scene, something strange begins to move. From the shoreline, enormous machines emerge, not with the harsh noise of a construction site or the crude feeling of cold steel, but like patient ants carrying out a task far bigger than themselves. Pumps stretch out long like metal flutes. Pipes coil and twist like the bodies of silver serpent. Tankers line up one after another, like a school of migrating fish. And overhead, empty-bellied spacecraft descend, hovering like seabirds waiting to be filled. This entire system is built for one purpose: to draw water from Lake Superior and send it to the sun. Said in the most poetic way, it is an attempt to lift the Earth's memories up to the sky. Said in the most practical way, it is an act so bold it borders on childlike. From your ship, you watch with a mix of excitement and quiet doubt. The first streams of water are pulled from the lake, swirling upward like ribbons of liquid glass. They rush into the pipes, flow through hundreds of kilometers of tubing, and are then transferred into storage tanks aboard waiting ships. There is so much water that the surface of Lake Superior seems to lose a thin outer layer, as if the planet shivers slightly from being touched too deeply. Your ship flies alongside a convoy of others, each one carrying billions of liters of water. The destination is still the same, at the bright spear that swallowed the tiny cup, without reacting at all. And this time, you hope something, anything, will be different. A sound, a plume of vapor, a subtle change. Anything. But as the ships enter the thick ocean of light, you feel something familiar. The heat has not yielded in the slightest. It continues to spill outward like an invisible sea, burning away anything too weak to exist within it. The ships open their bays and pour out their cargo in great torrents, sheets of water cascading into the stellar furnace. And once again, what happens is exactly what happened before. The water evaporates before it can touch any layer of plasma. No explosion, no shockwave, visible reaction. Only clouds of vapor ripped apart, shredded into invisible pieces, and dissolved into the light, disappearing in the sun's absolute indifference. The silhouette disappears. A quiet voice from some engineer murmurs over the radio. We're watering the wind, but you know it's not the wind. It's a place where the very idea of water no longer makes sense. Even when the scale is amplified by millions of times, the result is the same, the sun's complete silence. It doesn't grow dimmer, it doesn't grow cooler. If anything, the light almost seems richer, as though it calmly consumes everything offered to it like an old god with endless patience. You sigh, but it's not the sigh of frustration. It's the sound you make when a piece of truth finally settles within you. Not every effort leads to change. The universe never promised to respond to our passion. It only invites us to watch, to reflect, and to let go of our need to control the uncontrollable. Through the window, you glance back at Earth and see that Lake Superior is no longer whole. The surface is no longer a seamless blue mirror. It looks like a diary with pages torn out, empty, thinned, and quietly sad in a very human way. You suddenly understand why this part of the journey was called draining the memories of Earth. Water is not just matter. It is history, life, layers of time folded into each drop. When we take the water away, we are taking away chapters that the planet spent millions of years writing. And in return, the sun remains there, unchanged, steady, detached within its own blazing nature. The ship gently shifts course, preparing for the next experiment. You rest your head against the seat, your heart full of unanswered questions, but no longer in a hurry. Because out here, everything happens at a slow, meditative pace, like a piece of ambient music stretching across centuries. And as the light in front of you spreads out like a sheet of golden silk, you know the journey is far from over, and that what comes next may be stranger than an emptying lake. At this moment, another question appears. Maybe the problem isn't the amount of water. Maybe it's the very nature of the star we're trying to calm. That thought, at first just a faint streak of light in the corner of your mind, slowly expands. You look toward the sun, not as a fixed ball of fire, but as a living being, breathing and humming a song humanity has never truly understood. The experiment with the small glass, the experiment with an entire lake, both have been absorbed into its silence. Both have been absorbed into its silence. Both offer you the same gentle reminder. If you want to understand something, sometimes you have to stop acting and start listening. So you sit still. You rest your hands on the armrests. Relax your shoulders. Let your heart beat slow. The ship drifts away from the fading traces of the second experiment, and the space ahead opens like a blank page. In that moment, you feel something very simple. Before trying to change a star, we have to learn how that star lives. The sun rises before you, so large and warm that just looking at it makes you feel you're standing before something beyond every measure. Not the cartoon flame we draw in books, not a meaningless fireball. In the stillness of space, it feels like an ancient soul singing the song of atoms themselves, a song that has gone on for billions of years without pause, without losing its rhythm. Do you hear it? Of course you don't. No sound can travel through a vacuum. But you can feel something that is very much like a melody. A faint vibration running through the ship, an invisible breathing brushing against your skin, a tide of light spreading outward like waves on the sea. All of it blends not into a sound, but into a feeling your mind quietly names. This fire is not the fire of the earth. At home in the kitchen, flames vanish when you pour water on them. But here, in this great reactor we call the sun, water is not an enemy. It is raw material, carrying within it a structure that can be broken down into hydrogen, the gentle fuel the sun favors, like an artist who never grows tired of a familiar scale. Contrary to your hopes, water does not soften the sun's song. It makes the song sing louder. You picture billions of droplets dissolving into the hot plasma, breaking into tiny pieces like shattered dreams, then breaking further still into hydrogen and oxygen. And just as a fire leaps higher when the wind rises, the sun swallows that hydrogen, sends it inward to the core, where the pressure is beyond words, and turns it into radiant energy. The universe whispers, "Not everything that extinguishes fire on Earth can extinguish the fire of the stars." You tilt your head slightly, feeling an old truth presented under a new light. We're used to stovetops, to water putting out flames, to the small logic of daily life. But the sun doesn't belong to that world. It does not burn like wood. It does not flare like gasoline. It does not go out when it meets water. It doesn't burn at all. It fuses. It does what no earthly flame can do. Hydrogen, the lightest, simplest, most modest element, is the very material that has kept Earth warm and alive for billions of years. When water approaches the sun, what the sun sees is not water. It sees hydrogen, waiting to be freed. Fuel searching for its way back into the cycle of light. And suddenly you understand. None of your attempts failed because the water was too little or too much. They failed because we forgot to ask the most important question. What does the sun need in order to exist? As the ship begins to drift slowly around the sun, you see streams of plasma coiling like the tangled hair of a sleeping god. Bright flares leap from its surface, stretching hundreds of thousands of kilometers into space, like fingers of fire reaching out to touch the void. The dark sunspots look like the low notes in a symphony of light, quiet, profound, yet never out of tune. You don't try to explain anymore, you just listen. And in that moment of listening, a gentle thought appears. If water cannot extinguish the fire of the sun, then what would happen if we used even more? So much that it is no longer a small experiment, but an act big enough to rewrite the whole story. Imagine a morning where there is no trace of blue left on the planet. No more oceans dyeing the sky in soft colors. No more sea surface to mirror the footsteps of sunlight. Instead, there are enormous valleys, huge empty basins, kilometers deep, where waves once ran tirelessly through the centuries. Ancient continental shelves, once swallowed by water, are now laid bare, rough and gray, like old bones pushing up through the skin of the world. In your imagination, you step down into one of these drained ocean basins. Each footstep makes a dry, dusty crunch, like the sound of a planet trying not to choke. No more seagulls. No more wind slicing across the face of waves. No more fresh salt on the air. Only a vast, unmoving emptiness. In the place that was once the deepest point on Earth, the Mariana Trench, where the cold used to make people shiver just by thinking about it. Everything is now dry, like limestone in an ancient cave, crumbling into pieces like a dream that's been compressed for too long. Then you picture the first creatures to be affected. Fish. Shoals upon shoals. Billions of fish. Wake up one morning to find there is nowhere left to swim. Their scales dry out. The shimmer that once glowed under deep water becomes dull shards of glass, blowing away in the wind. Seaweed, algae, coral. Everything that once painted the oceans green and blue dissolves like fragments of memory, erased from a book. Without the seas to soften and balance it, the climate goes mad. Days grow so hot that rock itself begins to soften. Nights grow so cold that the ground cracks like dry skin. The ocean currents, the invisible lungs of the climate, come to a stop. Vapor no longer rises, rain disappears, as if it had never existed in the dictionary of this planet. Earth's colors begin to change. No more blue, no more white. None of the shades we associate with life. It turns rust, red, gray, and ashen. Like a heart short on blood, trying to squeeze out a few final beats before sinking into silence. You stand there, in the middle of this emptied basin in your mind, and you hear a very faint sound, like the sigh of the planet itself. Because water is not just a chemical compound, it is memory, it is breath. It is the way this world remembers its own childhood. Water carries the history of millions of years. Water nourishes every cell, every forest, every cloud and storm. Water holds within it the whispers of wind, of waves, of all the sails that have crossed the seas through the ages. And when the water is taken away, Earth becomes a being that has lost its memory, a planet that no longer knows who it is, no longer knows how to go on living. You place your hand on that cracked, lifeless ground in your imagination, ground that once held thousands of species, the slap of fish tails, the softness of seaweed swaying with the waves. Now there is only dust. Only dust. Dust rising on the wind like ashes from a book that has been burned. Then you lift your eyes to the sky. There are no clouds. No moisture left to sculpt gentle shapes that drift and soften the light. The sky turns sharp, dry, and utterly without tenderness. The sun, like a lonely being, still shines, but its light now falls on a world with no water to bend it into rainbows, no humidity to take the edge off its glare. You think of the strange contrast. When we bring water toward the sun, it becomes fuel. When we take water away from Earth, the planet dies, a lesson that is both cruel and deeply meditative. Not every place needs what we think is salvation. And not every place can survive the sacrifice we believe it can bear. You stand there and let this truth sink into you like a sunset slowly spilling over the ocean, a sea that no longer exists in the story you're telling, but still lives on in the listener's memory. Earth doesn't just lose water, it loses balance. It loses the kindness of its climate. It loses its heartbeat, its breath. And you realize something simple yet profound. The oceans are not just water. The oceans are the heart of the planet. Draining Earth of its water is like taking the breath away from someone who is sleeping. No life can endure that. No dream can remain whole after such an act. As you prepare to leave this dry, exposed seabed in your imagination, a sentence drifts through your mind, gentle as the universe's final reminder. Water is memory, the heartbeat of a world. When memory is drained away, the planet no longer knows how to live. After witnessing the vision of a dried-out Earth, like a heart that has lost its rhythm, you stand there silently in your mind. At the bottom of a valley where the ocean once lay beneath thousands of meters of water, and from within that emptiness, a new idea arrives, like a thin breath of wind, so soft you almost think you imagined it. But it doesn't fade. It lingers, persistent, like a grain of cosmic dust wanting to finish an unfinished story. If water cannot soothe the sun, and the lack of water can kill the earth, Then what happens if water itself becomes a star? That question, strange, bold, but full of dreamlike energy, opens like a small doorway. You step through, and the journey continues, gently, like a narrow stream winding between cold stones. Imagine, in the black depth of space, where light is rare as a whisper, there appears a colossal sphere of water, as large as a moon, soft and quiet as if it were asleep. It floats in the endless void with no visible force holding it, no hand pushing it, as though the universe itself placed it exactly where it needed to be. Its surface is astonishing. One part is boiling, giant bubbles swelling and bursting in absolute silence. Another part is frozen, forming delicate crystalline plates, thin as butterfly wings, stacked like layers of glass cloud. All of it together gives the impression of a soul breathing, its breath slow, sometimes hot, sometimes cold, sometimes gentle, sometimes edged. You feel as though you could reach out, touch that ice, and hear the whisper of each molecule changing its destiny. Inside this sphere of water, something extraordinary is happening. Water, the same substance that once fed Earth, cooled forests, and flowed through human hearts, is now under immense pressure. When water is squeezed so tightly that there is no space left to hide, its atoms begin to come apart. Hydrogen, the lightest of all elements, oxygen, fierce and eager to bond. Under crushing pressure, they are no longer water. They become fuel. They become the opening line of one of the universe's oldest songs, the song of nuclear fusion. Then, a pause, a silence like a held breath, and with a single burst, without sound but full of light, everything changes. You see from deep inside that sphere a point of brightness blossoming, small at first, like the very first heartbeat of a newborn being. Then it grows and grows. The light doesn't just shine, it pushes outward, driving the surrounding water to boil one last time before being swallowed by the glow. A star is born. A water sun. Both familiar and strange. It doesn't blaze with the harsh red of burning wood. It doesn't explode like a blacksmith's furnace of the gods. It shines with a pale, gentle blue, like mist over a lake at dawn. In your imagination, you drift closer. The light of this newborn star feels softer than the sun's, as if it was born from liquid memories, from the spirit of ancient oceans. Layers of plasma glide over one another like ripples sliding across a calm sea. Loops of light fan out like ribbons of vapor rising in the evening sun, and every pulse, steady as a heartbeat, is not just energy, but a symphony of pressure, of hydrogen, of rebirth. You realize this. When water is squeezed to its absolute limit, it is no longer water. It becomes light. It becomes a star. You stand in silence, sensing this star like a giant candle someone has lit in the night of the universe. But unlike human candles, which burn, then die, this one can last millions, even billions of years, singing its quiet song into the endless dark. And as you gaze into it, you feel a strange truth. Nothing in the universe really disappears. Water becomes vapor, vapor becomes light. Light becomes energy that nourishes the fabric of space. It is as if the universe is whispering. Destruction and creation are just two sides of the same turning wheel. You keep watching, and something even more magical happens. The water star is not still. It begins to tug at the space around it, creating subtle ripples and curves, tiny waves like the gentle breath of someone sleeping deeply. And then you suddenly realize this light is like a gentler version of the sun, an elder brother, another being born from the same law. And something else makes your heart soften. If Earth's oceans are taken away, life will die. But when that same ocean is placed in a different context, compressed, squeezed, tested, it becomes a new source of life for the universe itself. A lesson as delicate as mist. What seems softest and most fragile may be the very thing that carries the power to shine the brightest. You watch the water star a little longer, letting its soft blue glow touch every corner of your mind. And when it finally settles into itself, you know the experiment has reached its peak. No more water evaporating into nothing. No more despair of vanishing oceans. Instead, there is a birth, quiet, improbable, but beautiful, like a dream. And as you turn away from that scene in your imagination, you feel a different kind of force stirring the curtain of space in the distance. Something is coming. An inevitable encounter. A dance of gravity about to begin. And a question rises, as light as the sound of a pillow brushing against a blanket. If a new sun has been born, what will happen when it moves closer to the real sun? After the water star is born, gentle, blue, like a new heartbeat in the universe. You might think the story would begin to fade, like music reaching a soft pause. But no, whatever exists in the cosmos is always in motion, always drawn towards something else, always pulled along invisible threads of gravity. And when you look farther out, to where the warm gold of the real sun is trembling softly, you can feel what intuition has always known. Two stars cannot simply stand still when they are breathing in the same patch of sky. They begin to drift toward each other, like two colossal beings connected by a song with no lyrics. From deep within your mind, a thought rises, thin as fog but carrying a quiet unease. Every light wants to find another light, and in that exact moment, Part 10 begins. The chaotic symphony the universe writes, with the breath of two suns. At first, from a great distance, both stars only bend space very slightly around themselves. Those curves are like two ripples on a lake, quietly gliding toward one another. But as they draw closer, they stretch the fabric of space-time more and more, turning the cosmos into a great drumhead that trembles under their presence. The real sun, someone fierce, starts to warp just a little, as if someone lightly press a hand into its layers of gas. The water star, blue, tender, young, is also squeezed, its surface swelling and tightening with each pull and push of gravity. They are like two vast dancers, feeling each other out, searching for the rhythm, testing the first steps of a dance that cannot be avoided. The dance does not begin with softness. It begins with tension. The real sun, once perfectly round like a flawless droplet of fire, is stretched toward the water star. From a sphere, it becomes a soft oval, like hot honey, tilting off the edge of a spoon. Streams of plasma twist inside it, surging outward and being pulled back in. No sound. But in your intuition, it roars like an unseen orchestra. A sequel. Yearbook. The water star is the same. Its blue light is pulled into long, silk-like strands, curling through space, painting arcs of brightness that look like trembling handwritten lines across the dark. The two stars coil around each other, not with hands, but by bending space itself. Something you cannot see, but feel in every beat of your chest. The next moment is one of crushing, not in the brutal sense, but as a structure being pressed so it can be reborn in a new form. Imagine two gigantic hearts, beating so hard that their outlines begin to blur and fuse. The real sun swells, then contracts, then swells again, each time like a heavy sigh from the universe itself. The water star shivers in ripples, like a child forced to grow up too quickly. And when the distance between them shrinks to only a few times their own diameters, the wild dance begins. Space twists like a huge ribbon being wrung in powerful hands. Loops of plasma are flung outward, coiling into fiery spirals that drift through space like radiant streamers. Some loops curl in on themselves, forming rings of flame, turning slowly in the dark. Others tear apart, dissolving into glowing mist. The entire sky, at least the part around you, becomes a performance so spectacular that even distant galaxies would pause to watch if they could. And in the middle of all that radiance, a calm, meditative thought rises within you. In the universe, destruction is sometimes just another phase of transformation. The two suns are not fighting. They are rewriting themselves. They are singing the song of union, a song stars have occasionally sung since the very beginning of space and time whenever fate demands they become one. But as you're lost in this beauty, a thin line of cold runs down your spine. Because while the universe may be smiling, Earth is not. The orbit of the blue planet, fragile, as thin as a chalk line drawn on a blackboard, begins to wobble. The sun, as it distorts, drags space-time into a new direction. The water star, twisting around it, adds its own distortions. And Earth, small, light, born to circle a single stable star, is suddenly flicked aside, like a leaf in a rising gust. You see your home world shudder, like a bird thrown off its rhythm in mid-flight. The oceans, if they still existed, would surge and heave. The sky would tilt, even if only a little, and then Earth is nudged off its old circular path and begins a new, longer, darker, colder curve. A planet slipping from its sun's embrace, like a child's hand torn from a mother's in a crowd. You glance back at the two stars merging for the last time, their light swelling into one great white sphere before slowly stabilizing again. A new sun is born from the union, bigger, brighter, hotter, beautiful, but not meant for your kind of life. And in that quiet you understand. Some questions are meant only for imagination, some experiments belong only in dreams. And some forms of beauty, no matter how magnificent, carry a price. A small planet like Earth could never afford. From that far-off vantage point, Earth is just a lonely blue dot drifting, no longer wrapped by oceans, no longer reflecting the colors of life. Only a once bright world, growing colder, dimmer, like a heartbeat left behind. And within that feeling, there is no terror, only a soft sadness. Like the moment you understand, some things are meant to remain exactly where they are, not pulled, not altered. When you look deeper, the truth appears gently. There is no way to use water to extinguish the sun, because the sun was never a fire like those we know. It is the song of nuclei, the music of light, the glowing heart of an entire patch of sky. And when water touches it, the sun does not quiet down. It shines more strongly. Water does not put out the fire of stars. It merely gives new breath to their ongoing song. Realizing this brings a soothing feeling. Sometimes what we've believed all our lives is simply a very kind misunderstanding between humanity and the cosmos. When everything settles, we are no longer standing before two suns. They dissolve into a gentle night, leaving a soft, silky emptiness, wide enough to hold a deeper thought. If Earth loses its water, life dissolves with it. Not only because water is the cradle of biology, but because water is memory, emotion, the heartbeat of this world. When the oceans vanish, Earth loses not only life, it loses its own story. And in that stillness, a tender understanding appears. The only thing extinguished in this imagined experiment is not the sun, but the dream of putting it out. Yet that is exactly when we come to understand light more clearly and water more deeply, and the delicate balance that keeps us here. Your breathing slows. Space grows softer. The idea that the universe is vast enough to swallow both suns no longer overwhelms you. It simply becomes a quiet truth. Earth doesn't need another star, nor grand experiments of cosmic scale. It only needs to remain as it is, with its seas, with just enough warmth, with the gentle orbit that has held it for billions of years. In that moment, every image of fire, water, light, and destruction melts away to make room for one simple, night breeze soft lesson. This home you are resting on is so precious that the universe has taken billions of years to prepare the perfect conditions for it. If you just grow still, relax, and let your breath blend into the darkness, you can feel that you are exactly where you are meant to be. On a planet gentle enough to cradle life, under a sun warm enough to nourish every dream, not needing to be put out, only needing to be appreciated. Sleep well.